All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are on the last leg of the event, and it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce our founder, Larry Page, and our chairman and CEO, Dr. Eric Schmidt.
It's great to be here. Thank you guys so much for spending so much time with us. I'm pleased to report that in the year since our last conference, business has come back, the globe is coming back after quite a year, and we continue to invest in building a new set of information services and platforms, and we're really trying to anticipate the changes that all of us globally are trying to make with respect to the web, with respect to information, and with respect to interesting platforms. I thought what we would do in the time we have is do a couple comments from Larry, and then frankly, I think at the end of the day, it's probably better to hear your questions and comments on anything and everything. So Larry, what's interesting, and I think people know you were here last year as well. It's interesting that you wandered around the demos, you sort of talked to a lot of people. Are there some things that really struck you that when you were walking around in terms of our products or things that you wanted to sort of highlight for this audience?
Well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be here. I'm really glad everyone's here and that you all could come again. One thing that really struck me, I was watching the product demos, was one that I feel like we were able to use reverse psychology, which is we told everyone they could leave and then no one left, which I thought was pretty funny. But we were really happy to be able to do that and that people were excited about seeing some of that. And I was struck, I actually pushed pretty hard to get translation into YouTube, both the captioning and the translation. And I was pretty struck at how excited people were by that. I'm really excited about it. And I've noticed, I think that's something in the US actually we don't feel as much because we have, basically a single language and so on. But having that ability to watch, just think about anyone in the world being able to watch any video, regardless of the language it's in, kind of automatically without people having to do anything to do that translation and have it work pretty well. And we're not quite there, but we are going to get there. And I think that can have a huge, huge impact on the world and an especially big impact for people in languages where there isn't as much content or where there's not as much communication like Arabic or other things. But I think it's going to be a really amazing thing. You saw it also on the phones, being able to speak and do translation. And, obviously that will get smoother and work better. And I'm really excited about those products. And they're growing like crazy also. So that was something I was really struck by. The only other areas I'd highlight is Android. And you saw a lot of mobile demos, but that's been growing tremendously as well. And I find it continues to work better and better kind of every day. I actually get a new build on my phone every day, and usually it works better than the previous one. And it's pretty exciting to see that pace of development. And similarly, all the demos that we showed were on Chrome, which is our new browser, and I'm really excited about that too, just how fast. I was kind of amazed watching the young people, type and move their mice and go through those products. Like you almost couldn't see stuff happen. It was so fast. And I think that's a really great thing. And it's partially due to Chrome, how fast Chrome is. And I'm also excited we're able to do that in a pretty open way. Chrome is based on WebKit, which is totally open source. And I think it's a really great thing for that core infrastructure to be modifiable by people and changeable and all that. So
what you're talking about are really products that are part of an overall strategy from Google, which we call cloud computing. And one of the ways to think about it is think about mobile devices. Everybody here has their mobile devices, and you all depend on them in all the obvious ways. And think about them no longer as just a phone or even a computer, but think of them as a gateway into a very, very large set of servers. So if you think about, for example, Google Voice, various voice recognition, translation, what you're really doing is using a very simple device that's talking over an internet to a very powerful set of servers that do magic. So if you look at, for example, Google Goggles, that's an example of what you can do. We have a lot of fun at Google sort of asking the question, if you have 1 million servers and these incredibly powerful handheld Android devices, what are the new things that you could do that you could never do before? And in those, I think, are very good examples of how the world is changing. Maybe we should just go to people's comments and questions. We can talk for a long time on any subject. Who would like to get started? Yes. Over here. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Brian Kinsella. I'm the CIO of a company called Renticle Initial. My CEO's spoken today, but he's gone, so I can say whatever I want to now.
Excellent.
First off, thank you to Google for introducing two new terms to me. One is mashups and the other one's Ajax. I used those terms when I was a boy. Ajax was for scouring and mashups were including sausages we had on a Thursday. So these are new terms for me.
But you know, we love recycling now.
Yeah. The story for our company is that we made a big leap of faith last year. We moved to Google Mail. We took a whole subsidiary of our company globally and put 700 users onto Mail. And last year, we took a research on those 700 individuals to make a decision of whether we rolled out the Mail to our 78,000 employees. And we made the decision to go. We're now at about 10,000 live. We'll be 25,000 live by the end of this year. That's a big step for us. We've also been making great use of the sites. We're actually building our own intranet on the sites. We actually put all our project management on the sites. We've connected into our PDAs. We're downloading onto PDAs. Fantastic performance. So the big question that's now on our agenda is really around the business applications, because we've not started to really look at the docs yet. And so I've got really two questions for you. One is, are you really serious about docs? And the second one is, I'm an Android phone user now. What can we do about the battery life on these things?
Larry, you're in charge of battery life.
Which phone do you have?
I have the latest Google phone.
Oh, the Nexus one?
Yeah.
Wow. We can get you a bigger battery, probably. I'll see you afterwards. But I've actually found the battery life to be pretty good, so I could take a look at your phone.
Don't disagree with him, Larry.
Well,
this is his experience.
no, I believe you. I was saying I'd actually debug his phone for him.
Well, that's a treat.
I've noticed there's a few people have phones where there's software running in the background that just sort of exhausts the battery quickly. So if you're not getting a day, there's something wrong. If you're not getting a full day kind of usage.
Yeah. So thank you for that. One of the interesting one of the interesting things is that the primary consumer of the battery life on these phones is the transmit-receive circuit. Right, so tuning that and obviously figuring out a way to not use too much of that extends your battery life. And people bring in applications that are not particularly smart about that, which is what Larry is trying to get at. Going back to your question about Google Apps, we're very, very serious about it. Your story is the story we're seeing. I think it's on the order of 1,000 companies a day now, in smaller than yours typically, are beginning to use some form of Google Docs. And they almost always start exactly the way you described. They come in through email or calendar, and they start using sites. We don't talk that much about Google Sites, but in fact, it's hugely successful within the enterprise. And so they're now roughly at the point that you described. And what they would like to do is they'd like to move to a cloud computing model for applications, and there's something that's holding them back. Either there's some feature that's missing on our part, or they have some embedded Windows DLL or something that holds them back, probably true for you as well. The answer to your question is we're very, very serious. It's likely to be a very, very large business for us. We have what appears to be extremely large demand for the services. It's hard to replicate all of the features and functionality that you're talking about, and that's not our goal. We're trying to get to an 80% solution. So my advice would be that within a corporation, if you can begin to use Docs for the things for which it works well, with an understanding that there are some functions for which it does not, that's a good starting point. And as we add more functionality, you'll be able to increase the number of people who can use this new service. And it'll take a while to make that transition. And there are probably some groups that will be very difficult to transition. You know, the people who are, for example, in love with incredibly powerful Excel macros. It's a very hard space and very sophisticated sort of user. Not a large market, but an important market. Right? That's a market that we're not going to be at anytime soon, as an example. Yes, sir.
Hi, this is Martin from Layer. Well, actually, the same question I asked Tim. You guys know how to build a business. You guys know what it is to do something well in a new medium. What's your advice to a couple, say, 32 people in Amsterdam who are doing maybe something similar or are on the cusp of that direction?
I would just say, make your products work really well for people and grow your users. I guess you have a significant number of users, but, continue to grow that.
These markets are so large when you hit them at the right point that, although Larry's answer was brief, it is in fact the right answer, right? And my experience is you get all these people who say, well, I know what this user wants and I want you, but in fact they don't. So we do a lot of stuff to iterate, to test. We have a lot of experience with user dynamics. We don't always make the right decisions, but we change quickly. So I think it's the culture, which is a user-first culture, which again Larry and Sergey invented, and then the second one is this fast iteration culture. And in a company of 32, you know everybody, you work all the time, you're good friends, you can move very, very quickly.
Thank you.
Hi. Hello. Hi. Lucas Cani from
Yes, hi.
GoTV.
Yes, hi, Lucas.
We are a media online in Europe. We are concentrated on content on demand mainly. So we believe there is three types of content online, consumption of content online. Media that you receive, like you go on CNN.com, media that you search, where we are focused on, and media that you share. Now there is the I like of Facebook. So I like page rank or like rank. How Google is focused on these and how, because not all contents are same, so how you are working on that direction and what you think about that?
I think it's an important area to get lots of feedback from people. And in fact, in Buzz, we have a Buzz This button, which is similar to that. I think so people have been sharing stuff in lots of different ways for a long time. And that's clearly a really important signal for a lot of different things. So I think we've done a pretty good job of harnessing that data. I think it's good that there's actually starting to be more and more of that data that's explicit from users. And I think that's pretty useful in lots of things.
One way to think about it is it'll probably allow our search to become better because we have more information from people about what matters versus what does not matter. So in that sense, it's a nice improvement. And it looks to me like there's going to be a lot of this sort of ideas. I think this is sort of a new phenomenon, and it's a good one generally. Yes, sir.
Hello. Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Jesus Badenes. I come from Spain, from Planeta, which is a book publishing company, both in Spain and Latin America. I know, Larry, that you love books from your university times. My question is, taking advantage of the conversation we had just before you came, which is there are three business models relating contents and relating books, which is one is subscription, the other one is patronage, advertising, the financing is advertising, the other one is basically transaction-based. Of those three models in the future, regarding for books or contents in general, which will be your guess in terms of percentage of generation revenues, of 100% generation revenues, how much will be attributable to each of those three business models? Thank you.
I think probably in a healthy model, you're going to have revenue from all those areas. And if you look, back to history or whatever, newspapers, magazines, all these kind of things have advertising revenue and, subscription revenue and transaction revenue, right? And all three of the models are in place. Books traditionally have not had advertising revenue, and only transaction-based revenue and not subscription revenue. But so it sort of depends on the exact type of content. But I'd say in the online world, certainly, like we're pretty good at generating targeted ads, and you can imagine targeted ads being in books, and we already sort of do that. So I think that makes sense in areas maybe where it didn't make as much sense in the traditional world. I think in terms of information, though, one thing that's different also in the digital world is that you can actually make as many copies of the data as you want. There's no cost to that. You obviously want to make money from content, but there's no actual physical cost for copying or distributing things, or it's de minimis. And so you don't really want models that restrict usage if you can avoid it. And so I think in general, having subscription type models or things where things get bundled together and users don't have to think about, am I spending 3 cents by viewing this thing, or 5 cents or $1 or whatever it is. If people don't have to think about that, they'll consume more. And at some level, that's probably good for content producers too, because the cost to make the content is fixed. Once you make the content, you want as many people to use it as possible, and you want to maximize the amount of money you make from it. So I think there's probably more potential in subscription in the future than there has been. And also, you do see that in cable TV and things like that. You do have bundles, basically, where someone's aggregating and deciding how to pay it out to the content producers.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Zahara Scott from B Media. First, thank you for the event. My question is around privacy. We spent some time yesterday talking a bit about it, and I'm an avid Google user, use over 20 plus applications, love all the products that you're producing and some that you premiered today. But I'd be disingenuous if I didn't say sometimes I got a little worried about how efficient everything is becoming and what you may be able to find out about me by taking a picture and uploading it in a Google search and the like. So I guess two-part question. One, if you could elaborate on some of what you were talking about, what the gentleman who was working with you before was talking about Google's initiatives around privacy, and then secondly, how you see that, if at all, as a piece of competitive advantage against some of the other folks who are entering the space, a la Facebook and the like, sort of being transparent in that area.
I would make a couple of general comments. The first is, when we look at our privacy policies, we believe we have the most privacy-centric privacy policies of any of the online services and so forth, and you can check that. So whether it's logs retention, cookie management, all of the things that actually allow, quote, your privacy to be violated, unquote, we have the most consumer or citizen favorable ones, and we negotiate pretty hard with governments and so forth to try to limit that for all the reasons that you said. Let me make a more general point, which is that I think that as a society, we have not really figured out what we want to do with all of this new technology. I'm not talking about Google, and I'm not talking about the laws. I'm talking about what's societally appropriate. We now have a generation of people who have exposed every aspect of their private lives, who are now coming of age, and we have technology that can track, dice, select, et cetera, et cetera. And my own view, which is a personal view, is that societies will determine the outcomes differently, right? That in England, there will be a different outcome as to how society wants to treat that than, for example, the United States. London, of course, has lots of video cameras on the streets, which would be anathema to the average citizen in the US. I'm not taking a side there. I'm just observing a significant difference, which really affects privacy.
Well, we do it in private instead of in public. In the U.S., they're all in private businesses rather than in the government.
So as a general statement, it seems obvious to me with the rise of this enormous amount of personal information, we have to have the debate. Again, going back to the Google answer, we're subject to all of the obvious laws, and we do our very best to follow them. Larry, do you want to add anything about Google and privacy?
I mean, it's a very, very interesting topic. You could write many theses on this, right? On just small aspects of it. And I think that's part of the issue people are having, is that it's clear that life is changing. It's clear that the internet is affecting people's lives in really meaningful ways. And it's clear that we don't know exactly where we're all headed. It's a combination of what the technologies can do and how people feel about it and how they want to use them and all that. And so it makes for a very interesting combination of things. I would just advise a little bit. We have lots and lots of interest, for example, in our logs and things like that. We've sort of yet to find any case of someone being harmed by the logs, whereas there are lots and lots of cases where people are putting on information, into the public that they didn't before. Pictures of them getting drunk or whatever, and then those things are used, cause them to not get a job or something like that. So there's like infinitely many cases there of just people publishing information online, in a semi-public or public way, and then that's causing them direct harm. So I think it's good to focus, it's good to be practical about some of these things and try to focus where there actually is harm being done as opposed to potential harm, which there sort of be anywhere.
And to give you a sense of the global scale of this, between the statistic that we've been using is that between the dawn of civilization of 2003, 5 exabytes of information were created in the last 2 days, 5 exabytes of information have been created, and that rate is accelerating. And virtually all of that is what we call user-generated content, about individuals, by individuals, for their friends, with a social signal or what have you. So this is a very, very big new phenomena. Google is particularly well poised to index and search that because it's impossible to figure out what's going on without a modern search engine. Yes, sir.
Sorry. Charles Roberts, I'm CEO of Kerry Mullis's company you spoke earlier.
Hi, Charles.
Hi. One of the problems we have, and I think a lot of technology developers and small entrepreneurial units like we have at biotech companies and medtech companies, is finding great collaborators worldwide when we're using a virtual model. And people that we can go straight to and we know that they're going to be good and work and have something to bring. One of the products I liked the best was the Google Squared. And I just wondered if there's a way of harnessing that to perhaps pick keywords out of people's abstracts or their references and pull them up in the kind of meta search that's done on Google Squared. Although for Kerry it might end up being frogs and rockets that would pull him up. I don't know.
Sure.
So can you imagine a way of either modifying Google Squared or evolving that so you get sort of more affinity information in the searches? Does that make sense to you?
Well, I'm a big fan of Google Squared. I'd love to see it incorporated into all
We
searches.
should define, for those of you who don't use Google Squared, why don't you define it?
Well, they demoed it earlier, but it's it basically lets you define over a subset of something, you can sort of add rows and columns as you need to. And you're really, what it's really doing at a higher level is really understanding the structure of what you're looking at. And I think that's the really powerful thing. And I think that does apply to a lot of searches that people are already doing, and trying to get that into a form where everyone can use it in an easily understandable interface would be a great thing.
One technical answer is it's possible to imagine allowing the user to write a program across that arbitrarily, which is, I think, one of the things that you're trying to get at. The problem is that 0.001% of the world can write such a program, and the 99.999% that can't would benefit if we could figure out what the real order should be in the rows and columns. If we could anticipate a good default, that would make a big difference. Let's see. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm from India and I represent the India Today group. I was amazed and really excited about your showcase today. Some of the products you showed today were fantastic. But I worry about the digital divide, and I worry about what all these new products are going to do. Is it going to become a case of haves and have-nots? Those who are already connected and technology savvy get savvier, and those who are not just get left behind. Can you talk about that? What could we do about things like that? Because in a country like mine, that's important.
It's interesting in India that the internet is still relatively nascent compared to, for example, China, which we obviously know a lot about. And so there's a set of things that are going to happen in countries to sort of get themselves really lifted out of poverty. India, as you know, has done in 50 years an enormous job of, for example, ending famine, self-sufficiency, amazing things and amazing growth. And I think the development of the kind of infrastructure that can handle the kinds of apps that we're talking about is fundamental. And I think so part of the answer is that you really do need some infrastructure that is going to have to be developed in important countries like India, which are busy modernizing. And it's just as important as roads, bridges, and highways, if not more so. That's point one. Point two is that this remarkable spread of SMS-capable, inexpensive phones is the antipode of that. It basically allows you to reach literally every human being, virtually every human being on the planet, except maybe the bottom 500 million. But you can get sort of 90% with text messaging and SMS messaging and SMS querying. We have a huge project to try to make that more relevant. We've literally gone from a position where at the beginning of our lifetimes, almost no one had access to information, to a point by the end of all of our lifetimes where virtually every human being will have access to virtually all of the world's information. And I do believe that that's achievable even on these very inexpensive handheld phones.
I was going to say, I'd love for it to happen sooner, but I would say that with Android being free and open sourced, and I think the likely method that people will get access in places where they don't have it now is to have really low-cost phones that have a good internet experience. And I'm really enthused, actually, about the capabilities that you'll have doing that. I mean, you saw the translation on Android, and you can take the phone that you have, and in a year or two, that phone will be almost free, sort of in the context of a developing country or something like that. I mean, this is not, while the phone is really powerful and stuff, taking the guts of the CPU and the memory, and having a reasonable screen size to do that is not going to be expensive. It's going to be cheap really, really quickly. And so I think the other part we need is to get internet access, data access to be standardized, and available with every phone that's purchased. And it's starting to happen in developed countries. You're starting to get a lot of people buying phones with data built in. You're not going to buy an Android or an iPhone or something and not have data. That would be kind of crazy. And it's pretty clear that those phones, will make up larger and larger percentage. But I think that's the likely mechanism you'll see access for people in developed countries.
The other interesting data point is that virtually all of the revenue growth of the telecommunications industry is now coming from these wireless data plans. So that's a good model, because that means that they're highly incentivized to build out these networks, and that's true at pretty much every level. Because of cheaper Nexus ones, our core strategy with Android is to make a platform that's free from a licensing perspective and have other companies build them. I'm personally aware, and Larry's personally has seen, very impressive, very inexpensive smartphones. These are not phones I suspect that Google will sell. They'll be sold by the telecommunications industry. We've generally found it's better for them to do that. They have the provisioning, the systems, the accounting. They do a very good job on all of that, and we're not very good at it. So it's much, much better for us to provide the technology and essentially the cloud platform. And we obviously benefit at a societal level and obviously eventually because of customers.
You can see that also with the explosive growth of Android. Android's growing so fast because it's growing, tons and tons of different carriers and tons of different products.
And I agree with you that it's a strategic goal to get the minimum capability of a smartphone, which today is a couple $100 hardware price point, manufacturer price point, down to $20. Because at that point, the explosion that Larry is describing will be phenomenal. It's like billions of people will be affected. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Hi, Rob Grimshaw of Financial Times. I'm the MD of FT.com. Eric, I believe you've spoken recently about how you feel Google should help news publishers evolve their business models online. I wondered if you could give us any sort of insights into how your thinking is evolving in this area, and whether you have any plans to bring forward any specific initiatives on this front.
A simple summary of our strategy is to provide both an advertising choice for magazines, newspapers, and so forth, but also some form of a subscription choice. Because our billing systems and our reach is so broad, it should be possible for us to build subscription services that would, for example, allow a paywall if that's your business choice. We believe very, very strongly that the content is owned by the newspaper people and the magazine people, et cetera, and we want to give them that choice. Now, when we run that experiment, we have to be prepared for the fact that people prefer free over paid, right? And that the market for free is going to be much larger, but that smaller paid market might be more specialized, might be more targeted, might be more lucrative for other reasons. There's not a systematic way in the industry for doing that. So for you with FT.com, you have to struggle with, how do I build it? Do I build it myself, and so forth? And we can build tools. Google is not going to get into the news business. We're not going to be building these services ourselves. We said there's a strong line there, but we should build the tools that will enable you to do that, and those are in development.
Hello, my name is Andre Stark from Autoscout24. I have an internal question, actually, and somebody told me inside Google that you guys don't use business cases. And
business cases?
Yeah.
What are those?
Yeah, exactly. So if that wouldn't have been true, the rest of the question would have been obsolete. But obviously, it is true. So I'm really intrigued to understand how you guys allocate your funds and what we can learn as other entrepreneurs or managing directors or whatever we are here from you, and how to do it better in the future, because obviously it seems to work.
I think Eric actually teaches business cases.
Yes, I actually do. the Google philosophy is a little different from a normal company, would be a way to describe it. We don't do business plans in any classic way. We have the luxury of a strong advertising business, which gives us lots and lots of cash flow, so we can actually fund engineering, if you will, experiments. So one way to think about the Google model is we run and invest in engineering ideas, which frankly Larry and Sergey, the majority of them come from Larry and Sergey, basically, is the way to understand it. And they spend all of their days working with the key technical people, and their position is what Larry said earlier. We want something which will touch millions of people very quickly. We want something that will scale very quickly. And it's hard to do that, by the way. But what we found is that if you can build that product, we can make money from it. And this is not to take away from the other part of the company, which is run very traditionally. We have a very high quality and traditional finance, sales, accounting, so forth and so on, because you have to do all that too. Sales leadership goals and so forth and so on. But we try to view that as aggregate. We try to not make a product prove itself before we're convinced that it will really work. We run experiment after experiment after experiment. My own view on the sort of classic MBA business case is that by the time you've written the business case and vetted it and so forth, your competitor's already built the product and you're screwed. So you're much better off taking an aggressive position of try it, try it, try it, try it, with business judgment. And and that culture attracts a kind of person who moves quickly, is creative, and so forth, and they're great to work with. So that would be my advice. Larry, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do some basic kinds of planning, like in advertising, look at if we do this, what's the available market and things like that. I don't think it goes to, it's not a 20-page document that's like well thought out.
I'll give you an example. We never really had a strategic document until a couple of years ago when we were sort of bored and we thought we would write one because it's in our heads. So that's step one, right? So if it's not in your head, there's something wrong. Usually you're running it. And then last week we thought, well, maybe we'll try to figure out what our revenue looks like in a couple of years, right? Again, so we asked the question, and somebody said, well, this area is a much larger opportunity than we think, and we should put even more resources there. So occasionally we do that. But it's really more of a guidance principle than a deciding principle. You do not want to have a lot of P&Ls floating around, because then people optimize locally rather than globally.
I'd say it too. I feel like in general it's like fairly obvious. I mean, this one case.
It's obvious to you, Larry.
Well, if you've been in the business for a while, you kind of know roughly what should be going on.
Okay. More questions? Yes.
Hi,
yes, sir.
Guy Phillips in the IAB. Thanks for a great event. And Cirque du Soleil were fantastic last night, by the way. I thought the party.
Very good.
Thank you. I read on the wires a couple of days ago, I think, that you have a possible partnership with Intel and I think Sony TV, and just some background on that and whether this is a new bridgehead for home
I
entertainment.
would really like you to just read about that in a day or two.
Okay. Well, there we go. We'll read about it.
I'm sorry, I would normally like to answer your question, but if you could just sort of wait about 48 hours, that would be a much better. Thank you very much.
Do you have another question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Rishi Shah. I'm the head of digital at the Conservative Party. I'm a big user.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Although, if you believe the session earlier, not so much. Look, myself.
It's now your problem.
Thank you very much. Myself, my organisation, we're big users of Google products, and over the last couple of days, we've obviously heard of a huge array of kind of new applications, gadgets, devices, new territories you guys are moving into. I don't mean this is a philosophical question at all, but do you think there's a point at which Google becomes too big? And does it ever concern you about the potential? Sorry, does it ever concern you about the potential sort of crowding out effect that you might have on smaller businesses in markets that you go into, not as an intended consequence, but maybe as a purely unintended consequence of innovation? One thing that struck me about today is that the communications businesses that we've heard from tend to be British, but the technology businesses and the technology innovators that we've heard from have been exclusively non-British, and this is clearly an issue that, in the British economy that we have to try and handle. I don't know if that's, just a planning issue or whether you couldn't find any British businesses that you felt could match up on stage, but But does this ever concern you?
It does at many, the serious answer is it does at many levels. First, as a profit-seeking corporation, growth does matter. Our shareholders expect it, et cetera, et cetera. And growth solves a lot of problems in businesses. I think going back to the principles of businesses and so forth, if you're growing, and you're growing and you're doing it responsibly, you're providing real value, you're in a pretty good state.
Actually, Eric's quote is revenue solves all known problems.
Yes, I was trying to not say that, Larry. Revenue solves all known problems, especially if you're a CEO. And we talk about that a lot. But I think that the crowding out effect that you're describing is very real, and it occurs at every level in the market. It occurs in terms of small voices, it occurs in terms of creativity, in terms of small companies, and so forth. So, how do we behave? Well, the first thing is, these are markets that are going to be large-scale markets. It is a fact that there are going to be global corporations or institutions that will do things because there's a benefit to the kind of investment, essentially the integration of everything. Larry was talking about translation. These are just global businesses. And so if you're fundamentally running a very local business, you're not going to participate in that, right? It's just a different model. And from our perspective, we try very hard, based on this crowding out effect, to make sure that we're shipping an enormous amount of money in our advertising system to people who are smaller companies, advertisers, and so forth and so on. One of the benefits of the extraordinary benefits of the web is it really does create this level playing field, and it does actually allow you to target them, get money to them, and so forth. So we've tried. I don't remember the exact number, but it's somewhere between 8 and 10 billion, some huge number, $8 or $10 billion is shipped in and out of Google through this mechanism, and that really does provide jobs. With respect to the British economy and so forth, because it's so globally competitive now, there are in fact British firms. We've bought a couple small companies here, basically very, very smart technical folks, but all of us are part of a global war of talent, and that does not necessarily favor the United States for all obvious reasons.
I was going to say too, I think the making sure that the basic tools are pretty open, like I mentioned, the Chrome is open source and all that, I think is really helpful. Somebody can split that off. You can release your own version of Chrome if you want, if you have really great ideas of how to make it better, and even sell it or whatever you want to do. So I think the other thing is I'd say the internet ecosystem is getting more competitive. There's actually more companies, more funding, more people doing stuff than there ever has been before, and that's even growing quickly. I'd say that trend is accelerating. So I actually think we're doing well in that sense. There's a lot of activity, a lot of interesting things going on.
One way to think about it is because of the growth of the internet, the ability to use a small amount of capital to create a company of great value very quickly has never been higher. And you see this in the sort of fervor of the venture capital industry globally, deploying enormous amounts of money at very high valuations for businesses that have relatively small amounts of money. And that's because the venture capitalists and the founders of those companies do fundamentally believe that as these markets are built, they can be monetized. There's real value in having people's attention, and we agree with that.
As compared to when we started Google, valuations are probably 20 times higher or something like that. I mean, there's been a material change just because of the size of the internet and the success of the technology industry recently, that everything that gets created has very significant value. And we see this when we buy companies.
Yeah. So you go from 300 million people 10 years ago to 1.8 or whatever the current number is. I mean, these enormous markets. And if you follow my argument about mobile devices and the cloud computing reaching, say, 5 billion in the next 10 plus years, again, think about how even larger the markets are from where we are now. The growth rate's not stopped. More comments? Yes. There's a hand up over here. Yes. Yes, sir.
Hi there, I'm Alex Hoy. I run a marketing company called Latitude. And I've been working with the internet and thinking of things, where it's going to go for about 15 years, and we've been talking about convergence ever since then. I've never been so excited about how the video side of the internet is becoming reality. Obviously, we talked to the YouTube folks, and we understand a lot of where you guys are going. But to me, that's one of the biggest quantum shifts over the next 2 years, 3 years. Aside from what we understand from your product messaging on YouTube, what are the areas that you think are most interesting and that you're looking at and saying, this is really going to change in terms of how people consume video?
I'm quite alarmed at the number of hours of YouTube video that's uploaded every minute. And it's growing very, very quickly. So it seems like pretty much all of the world's video is now getting put on these cloud servers. And from our perspective, that's enormous because it means we can search it and so forth. And so you can imagine lots of interesting things with that. Today, people use it for all sorts of instructional things, documenting things, so forth, and training. And I'd really like to see the use of video in all of these smaller markets to try to get a message out. The best teachers, for example. Because it's finally now, the cost of video production and editing and so forth is so low that there really can be stars in both large and micro markets. So the teacher of such and such an art, right, for example, to promote himself or herself. And there are all sorts of examples like that. I don't think we're anywhere near the sort of union of video, local, social, and geo, right? That the combination of all of that is going to be amazing. There are many, many rumors about new phones that have more than one camera. They could do video conferencing. You can imagine all sorts of step-ups from that in the union of where am I, who am I, what's about me, and so forth. And it's the next stage of this growth in user-generated content, which will be even larger than what we've seen today.
Hi, I'm Brent Hoberman. I guess I've founded some big internet companies and now doing very small ones. And the change from when I did the big ones back in 2000 was SEO didn't really exist as an industry. And so now I'm a huge fan of Google, but also, I guess, a critical friend because I'm finding myself so dependent on this SEO industry. And I'm finding friends of mine who start business who put literally 30% of their team onto SEO. And the creativity and the innovation that I loved before in my previous startup, I find that I'm spending, I think, too little in SEO, but I don't find it that fascinating. What do you guys think of the SEO industry? And I know there is the old debates about the problems of, there are companies who can obviously lose page rank. I know it's only one criteria, but it's indication, and go from 6 to 0 overnight and not understand why.
I think SEO is kind of like test preparation. Like if you go and, go to one of these classes that's trying to just raise your score right before you take the standardized test. It's not a completely preventable thing. I mean, obviously there are ways to help, and it's also not completely bad. I mean, you do learn something, and you make things more indexable, which has value because there's all these people searching for things. So I think it's kind of just a necessary thing. I think some businesses are much more dependent on sort of search optimized traffic than others. Maybe you have a particular business that's more dependent. I think, so I don't know there's anything inherently we can do about that. We do make changes to Google, we're improving it all the time, and so we do make significant changes, and some of those affect individual sites significantly. I'm not sure what to do about that either, other than make sure we're communicating and people understand what we're doing. But in general, I think we could do a better job of helping people understand how we're indexing, and make sure that not too much time is required to sort of get an optimal outcome.
So Nikesh is pointing out that we've, as usual, run over. So thank you, Nikesh, for running us a little bit. I want to make sure we got all your questions. First, let me thank you, Larry, for coming all the way to visit and spend a lot of time.
Well, thank you, Eric.
Thank you. And in the audience, I see quite a few of my friends, speakers. I really appreciate the speakers, those of you who traveled. I see Sir Tim, I see Don, I see a number of other folks who I know really quite well, and you all are fantastic. I hope that some of our sessions were a little bit maybe too exciting, Larry, maybe the local warming one, et cetera. But perhaps they'll be the most memorable of our conference in any case. So Nikesh, thank you so much. Thank you all for spending so much time here, and I'll turn it over to Nikesh.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Larry. Okay. I promise we'll keep this very short and get you out of here in the next 5 minutes. But I just wanted to start off by once again thanking our speakers and our moderators who've done a fantastic job in being up here on stage and participating in the audience for the last 2 days. Thank you very much to our speakers and moderators. It was definitely my best Zeitgeist in the last 5 years, but I might be slightly biased. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. You had a wonderful 2 days. I think definitely believe the entertainment bar was raised tremendously by our team this year, so I'm wondering what they're going to do next year. But hopefully we'll figure it out. Maybe we'll have some user-generated content. We get you guys to start trying those things which they were doing last night, which could be quite interesting. We'll have an ambulance on standby. I thought it was great 2 days. We learned that it was too early for Archbishop Tutu to get on Facebook, which I thought was interesting, other than learning about Ubuntu. I particularly enjoyed I found it somewhat depressing, but I understand Mr. Kahneman's idea about we can't learn much from our experiences, and also that money cannot buy us happiness. But Eric did say revenue solves all known problems, so I'm not sure how I relate that professionally and personally, but we'll see. Tim did a fantastic job talking to us about the power of data. I thought the data session was extremely engaged, and we saw true fire on stage with reformed lawyers and data czars and people who understand the value of data and the internet. And of course, I learned the fascinating idea of how you can get frogs to fly 2 miles. That was pretty good. Anyway, well, we are all here, so I'm not going to repeat what happened over the last 2 days, but I found it particularly exhilarating. And in the end, it is your participation that makes these events a wonderful thing. So thank you very much for being a great audience and for being with us for the last 2 days.